Newfoundland room, so feel free to go into that room and you can get the stream of it. I'd now like to introduce the moderator for today's panel, John Young. John's the managing director of Temple Street Productions, which has achieved great success, of course, in the US, the UK, and in Canada with Orphan Black, The Next Step, and formats like Say Yes to the Dress Canada. And we're looking forward to their latest production, Killjoys.
Thank you. Thanks, Marla, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here to moderate this panel and jump into a conversation, hopefully with this panel and with all of you regarding this access to the US marketplace. How do we take our business here in Canada, do great things in Canada, but look to grow our business outside of these borders? I'm going to talk about that this morning. So without further ado, I'm going to just very, very briefly introduce the panel here. In the middle of the seats here, in the blue corner, so to speak, looking annoyingly tanned and healthy, we have Richard de Croce from BBC America. Richard
This is me without a tan, by the way.
even more annoying. The Senior Vice President of Programming for BBC America. Thank you for joining us, Richard. Corrie to my right, Senior Vice President, Independent Production at Bell Media. Thanks for joining us, Corrie, and Liz Wise. Liz is also the Senior Vice President at the CW for current programming. So thank you, everyone, for being here today. So our topic this morning, as I mentioned, is really as producers and broadcasters, writers, creators, how do we get access to the funding, the US marketplace, the content buyers that are out there? Can we take our wares to the US, and how will it help our businesses in the long run? It's obvious that we have 60 buyers of our content and our product in the US. So it's very intuitive that we think about this business and say, well, if the marketplace down there has 60 or so buyers, and in Canada we have perhaps a dozen or so, it does make perfect sense that we try to go where the buyers are, and how do we fit our content perhaps to suit that new marketplace. Now, of course, that is easier said than done, and we're going to get started and find out how we can perhaps do that. So as producers, and we sometimes feel like snake oil salesmen as we go to our broadcasters and commissioners, we've got to be aware of what the buyers want. We have to be aware of what our broadcasters and commissioners are looking for. So what are some of the key areas, Richard and Liz, particularly that your networks are looking for, and some of the specifics around what your channels are wanting to see from us as we produce or create a pitch for you?
Well, I'll just give a little background on BBC America, just quickly, a thumbnail sketch of the channel and the audience. Launched in '98 with the Discovery Channel. It was a joint venture at the time, and Discovery was the recipient of a lot of great natural history content from the BBC. We were launched in Bethesda in DC in that JV, as I said, in 1998. It's a general entertainment channel, so multi-genre. We didn't launch drama, scripted, kids, news. We were only able to launch a channel, which makes it a bit of a challenge because you have the breadth of the BBC output, the breadth of now the UK output, and we are filtering that content for a very affluent, upscale US audience. We target 25 to 54, adults 25 to 54, and the brand carries a lot of great heritage with it in the States. So we are looking, at the moment, we've got these phenomenal brands that we're able to platform in Doctor Who and Top Gear, some great scripted sci-fi shows, like the former, some amazing factual content like in the latter and Top Gear. So building on those two pillars of the schedule, we're looking for what everyone else is looking for right now in the States, which is non-derivative, very distinctive scripted content. Orphan Black being the shining example of that, I think. We're defined by our originals in the States, and like most channels are, you're defined by your originals. The other 160-odd other hours in the week, you hope to be able to weave the DNA of the brand into the other programming, but we are really looking for returning, serialized drama.
Right. And Liz?
Yeah, so we do the thumbnail overview of the CW. I think actually it's interesting for people to understand that the CW is the 5th broadcast network, yet our our programming parameters are actually very small. We program 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. So that's only 10 hours of programming, clearly, a week. Our corporate parents are CBS and Warner Brothers, and the majority of our programming comes from those two entities. I would say more than the majority. And in terms of sort of what we're about, the brand of the CW has always been kind of, we're very much entertainment. It's about sort of escapist. The way that we like to say it, it's the big idea, but the big idea is the Trojan horse for a relationship show. Because our audience really likes serialized dramas. We obviously want to try and see if we can make episodes as open and closed as possible, so that, serialized dramas, the problem we have is, and talking more from the current perspective, the serialized dramas have a little bit of a barrier to entry once you get into the series. So how do you find that perfect balance between incredibly engaging and fabulous characters and conflict, but still allow an audience member to come in a little bit later? We've been trying to find that sort of perfect blend. So I would say if there's like a headline for the CW, is kind of the big idea with really incredible relationships and compelling characters behind it.
Good. And Liz and Richard, both of you are working on content that is either in partnership with Canadian broadcasters, is either shot in Canada with Canadian producers, Canadian talent, etc. So those relationships and partnerships, we're going to talk a bit more about that today, because I think we're seeing more of them, and there's a number of reasons for that. We want to try and explore some of the reasons why these are becoming more prevalent as we go forward. And Corrie, no more so than Bell and all the channels that you look after, and forging those partnerships with US broadcasters. What are some of the things that you're looking for? Why are those partnerships working for you in some cases for Bell? Why are you looking out to see which partnerships make most sense and what you can get out of it?
Well, I think, Canadian producers in this room have been pretty experienced in working with foreign broadcasters, foreign distributors for a very long time in order to amass the financing they need to make their shows. There are very, very few shows that I can even remember that were fully financed out of what is kind of a small domestic market. There were some. Those are increasingly few and far between now, particularly in the bigger budget scripted areas. And I think those partnerships and relationships that started years ago have just become increasingly more important, and broadcasters are taking a more active role in helping to either forge new ones or maintain existing ones or enhance existing ones. And I think broadcasters around the world are increasingly open to trying to find ways to collaborate to allow them to commission and get on their channels the kinds of shows that they'd like to have at the budget levels they'd like to have them, which are hard to do if you're not able to kind of work cooperatively. So we're very, very appreciative of those partnerships that we have. The work that we've done for our channels with both of you have been fantastic, and we've found it to be really collaborative. Creatively, it's been very rewarding. The key being is we always wanted the same show, which really helps. But we also, people brought everything they could to the table and worked really reasonably to try and make sure that it was something that worked for both of our audiences and that protected both of our respective brands and schedules. So it's increasingly important, and that's what we kind of look for when we're trying to carve new ones.
And John Moreno Stella this morning was talking about collaboration, partnerships galore, if you will, in the US, indeed, and more so with Canada and the US. And we wonder, is the content and the creation and the writing getting better in Canada, or is it the financial panacea that does make things work and makes things a little easier to get done? So Corrie, you touched on budgets, and the bigger budgets we have over a certain level, it's going to be tough to fund that production from Canada without partnership. So is it finance? Is it creative? Is it a bit of both? Richard?
It's a bit of both.
Yeah.
Right, I think there's just more opportunity now for voices to be heard. And I think that's what we look for when we sit down with producers or broadcasters. Is this a project? And we'll get to what stage we look at things. But is this a project from the type of writer, showrunner who's going to tell a story that they've been dying to tell, right? They're passionate about a story. Are they a partner that is flexible and resourceful as well, because the budgets are ambitious. I think we've probably all been involved with projects that had too many partners. So you have to just be careful there, and because then the editorial tends to get diluted because you're trying to serve too many masters. That's why a U.S.-Canadian co-production very often is fruitful, because you choose who you're in business with generally, and then make sure you're of the like mind of what you want to get out of the show. And it happens at different stages. It can be from a piece of paper from an established producer, or something that's much more fleshed out from a young creative team or a young studio that they know exactly what the first season's going to look like, and maybe second and third season. They've got that all beat out. So it's just the things you have to consider before you go.
And Liz, what drives you for these types of partnerships? What's working for you?
I think it's been an evolution over the last few years. I mean, I think that, this could be a little naive, but I think some of it is the fact there's been a lot of the service or this Canadian content type of programs that have allowed producers and talent to work inside the framework of these sort of, I'm saying it from the American perspective, and American shows. And so they understand both the creative and the mechanics of how to build a show that is going to be exportable in a lot of ways. And I think, I always think of this business as an apprenticeship program, and almost in every level, like as a writer, as a producer, as a director. And so I feel like you've got now decades of people who have grown up and who, for which the borders are a little bit less distinguishable, and they want to be competitive, and so but they also want to be competitive on their own home turf. Just the producers that we do Reign and Beauty and the Beast with, like those shows are Canadian content shows, but they are not treated any differently on my network than any other show. The quality standards, that show, Reign particularly, I just have to shout out just because it's gorgeous. There's nothing like it on TV, and what they pull off every week is astounding. Well, those producers make that show. Those producers could make another show. There's a level of talent, I think. And I say the same thing too. There's a little bit more on the journeyman side, but the directors who do those shows for me who succeed, we can move on to other shows. And then they can come back and they can do shows for Canada. They've been trained in other places. So I feel like all of that is seeding a very vital industry that then is set for more and more exports.
And as producers, and many of them in the room, as we think about those first steps to access the US and how we think about working with our Canadian broadcaster, perhaps, and together, going to the US to see if our show, if it needs the financing, if it fits with the network in the US. What are the steps that we have to think about as producers to get on that path? How do we do that? Do we do it alone? Do we do it only with Canadian broadcasters? Do we need agents, managers, etc., to help us with that? Can you give us some of the insights or some of the ways that you think about a Canadian producer picking up the phone and making the call to you?
I think we would rather establish relationships directly with talent, to be quite honest, directly with writers. If they have representation in the States, great. But I think that's our goal, is to create an atmosphere, create a channel that is talent friendly, and that where talent wants to work. Not because we have the biggest platform or spend more than anything, but that they can tell their story. So it's a culture that you want to be known for, I think, from a broadcast point of view. But I'm happy to give out our contact information. People can contact us directly with projects, with scripts, ideas, etc. That's why we're here.
Right. I think we're a little different. As I said, the reality is the majority of our program is going to come through our partners. So ideally, everything is going to be funneled one way or another through CBS or Warner Brothers. That's not to say that even a co-production could be developed and then ultimately possibly funneled through those two areas. That would be the primary way to go. You know, again, boots on the ground for us is, you know, agents and managers. They know us really well. It's a really easy way to get entree into what our particular needs are. You know, because I think people, I think there's a perception out there that the CW is kind of this teen network, and we've been fighting that for a long time, and I think we're constantly moving past it with the success of Jane the Virgin, with like, you know, with The Flash being the largest telecast since we started, basically. I think we're starting to get this idea of like, we don't do shows in high school, but it's hard to get to someone to say, you know, the next Homeland, bring that to CW, you know, but that is kind of what we want. So, but the agents and the managers who are out there in the world, they kind of know that, they've got that message already. So in some ways I say like that's a really great way to kind of, to get an entree, because those people are out there every day knowing the business, and they'll know what all the various buyers want. But you know, for some reason that can't happen, you know, I don't want to make that a barrier either. If there's a great idea, you know, ultimately we want to hear it, because there's going to be, we, like any other network, we want to be competitive. And by being competitive, it means we have to be open in some capacity. So I would never say, don't come to us.
And Corrie, as producers in Canada, we typically feel emboldened when we've spoke to our broadcaster in Canada. We have development, we have potentially greenlit series, and then we think the possibilities of going to the US. For the most part, I would say in terms of getting the budget levels that we need to hit the creative out of the park, and your networks seem to be very open to that, and whether that's the right way to go, or do we as producers bring shows that have been greenlit or developed in the US back to you? Does it matter from your perspective?
I think we're open, much as Liz is, we're open to any great idea, and we're quite flexible about how we take in projects and think about them and ultimately get involved. So I don't know that there's one route that's particularly better than another, but I do know that if I don't know, they're always hard to get a development order with us, and it's always harder to get a green light. So it's a bit tricky to kind of provide a formula. And the range of types of deals, you know, the snowflake analogy we all heard earlier is to a degree true. I mean, every project's very unique, and it'll all have its own different origins. Some of the times it'll be something that came out of the Film Center and took 10 years of long development and slogging to turn into Orphan Black, and that's an amazing story, and we were delighted to get involved when we did, which was when it was already well down a development path in its first iteration anyhow. Other ones are things that start, like a Flashpoint, started as a small idea, again, directly with writers as one of our writer-only projects, and turned into a project that then was taken outside of our borders, and that worked really well too. Other projects like Rain are things that are developed, and we are part of that, but in a more, it's more fully formed, and then we get involved, and it comes in that way. So there is no one strict formula, because otherwise you'd miss out on potentially some great projects and ideas.
And Richard, you mentioned coming in directly and pitching. We, as I think about the gatekeepers of the agents in the US and managers in the US, it seems like it's not necessary to have that. That's not necessarily a barrier, perhaps, no doubt perhaps a necessary
I mean,
evil.
it definitely helps, but to both of my colleagues' points, we're open to great ideas, so you don't want to be, you know,
in the way.
And you don't want someone else speaking for you in terms of, they're not looking for that, you know, that kind of thing, where we're just looking for original, you know, innovative, intelligent content, and I'd personally rather hear it direct from the creator. Not to say that they can't, you know, they don't get some form of validation by having, you know, one of the big agencies, talent agencies, representing them. But I'd rather they heard it directly, and then we can deal with everything else after the fact.
Great.
I mean, it's This might seem incredibly obvious to say, but certainly the easiest way to walk in the door is with something that the network wants, and that could be that could be talent.
Right.
That could be a writer that they already like.
Yeah.
You know, that could be, it doesn't have to be on-screen presence. It could be a director that they already like. And then you've got the foothold. You know, it's really sort of, it's a little Victorian in some ways. You just need that entry card. Like, here's my entry card.
Indeed. So we work in partnership. We get a show pitched, it's developed, it's greenlit, and let's say we have a multi-broadcast partnership that's underway. I wonder if you could share with us some of the thoughts on the issues that arise with that cross-border UN arrangement that we've just put together for certainly for a lot of great creative and content reasons, and certainly for financial reasons that make sense for all of us. But so producers have to navigate through some of those issues, and we are that, hopefully the conduit to help make it all work. But let's talk about some of those issues that you might face when Canadian and US broadcasters are partnering up. How have you found that, and what are some of the pitfalls for us to try and avoid?
Are we already are we in development?
We're in. We've developed. We're making the show.
Right, we're making the show. I think something we discussed earlier in the week is having the production team and the digital team probably shouldn't be two different entities. Or, the closer they are, the better from the beginning.
Didn't you hear about the digital irrelevancy?
I was on the phone in my room during that, but it's not irrelevant from a marketing standpoint, from an engagement standpoint.
Certainly not from our point of view.
Not from our point of view. If anyone's doing it the best in the States right now, we use Jimmy Fallon as an example because they're capturing content in parallel and in conjunction with the production team. Those are assets we can use, all of us can use, 6-8 months out of TX, leading up to the premiere, during the premiere, engagement with writers who can blog from the set, content that's captured with the talent on the set, rather than going back and trying to find everyone. They may be onto another project. That's something that is more and more key, and it's not nearly irrelevant. It's as relevant as any other marketing asset or any other production asset, in my opinion.
Some of the other issues we might face, we have launch dates that have to sync up perhaps or not. You mentioned digital cohesion, Richard. Corrie, some of the things that you've
I think
found?
you've touched on an important one, actually. The broadcast plans do need to be talked about and
sync up.
carefully synced up, or not, depending. If our partnership is with a U.S. specialty channel, it's a different situation than if it's with a U.S. network such as CW.
Our needs are probably at the most going to be in the summer. Well,
Same.
is that going to be the same for you?
And it probably won't be the same for us. So it's particularly if it's for a project for CTV. So that calls for careful conversations and negotiations ahead of time as you're kind of still trying to put together whether the UN can sit around the same table on the same project. It's easier for sure if it's with a specialty channel such as BBC America because your signal doesn't come into Canada.
Right.
At the same time, often what we're doing with you is a serialized drama.
Right.
And you can't have those be
Right.
at different times, particularly if it's for our channel
Not in the
space,
same time zone, for
where
sure.
people are just
Well,
all
spoilers
over it.
nowadays.
Right.
In
Yeah.
a world where, like everything, if we were to do something which is, at any level of a mystery or something, and our synchronization wasn't up, I can just imagine that. Again,
So, we
the
sync
world.
we sync with space. We sync our clocks with space.
Yeah.
We sync social with space when we go out. At 9 o'clock, April 18th, we're going to be in step. So no one knows anything before anyone else does. It's a really being conscious of the viewer experience and kind of walking in step with your partner. And like you said, we don't bleed from a linear point of view, but social being what it is, there's no border there.
Yeah.
So we're very, I think, respectful of each other, but also very respectful of the fan experience.
Yeah.
A
And that
practical limitation,
Yeah.
if you want to hear it. Again, when we do these Canadian content shows, to the point of what I was saying before, which is they cannot be any different than any other show on network, and particularly our shows can't be any different than any other network. So the bar, we know what the bar is. And so when I'm looking for directors, I have to hire Canadian directors. Well, there's certainly the very now quite a deep talent pool of directors, which is great. However, the ones that are really talented also get pulled onto other shows, so it's constantly. And we have a very strong diversity mandate as well, too. And that's where I think that, if anything else, that's the most challenging part of finding directors for my Canadian shows is on the diversity side. So it's a very practical limitation.
So these partnerships, I mean, clearly they're not going away. I think as we get budgets that are bigger and bigger, as more and more Canadian content gets made of a size and scale, this just becomes, again, a necessity more than anything in order to make the jigsaw puzzle come together and the financing. Do you see the same thing, Corrie? Do you see a growth in this type of area as you look at bigger budgets and different types of programming?
I think so. I mean, I can't imagine how we'd be able to amass, well, I guess, unless we reduce the volume of programming that we're doing, which is not an appealing option, then I think we're just going to increasingly need to find more and more partnerships and more ways to try and bring together the bits of financing needed to actually fund the projects that we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Richard and Liz, the same, you say more and more of these being required in order to fill your mandates at your networks?
I'm not sure. I can't for sure say the future because, again, with something like Beauty and the Beast airing in the summer, it changes a little bit of the dynamic of suddenly how we work with our partners in different times of the year. But again, I don't want to say, don't bring us your good idea, because if, again, we want to be there for something, what is that next Orphan Black? What is that next Homeland? It's we want to be on that. We want the knock on the door, same as everybody else.
I thought for me, I know the content that I'm watching right now. A lot of the great content that we're seeing out there has the setting of the content as character almost within the show, whether it's Fargo or Breaking Bad or
Fortitude.
Justified, to name many shows. And I wonder if that's something that crosses your mind as we think about the setting and are we too Canadian when we look at our productions and we see our cities in Canada? Is that a problem given some of the recent trends to the setting being very much part of the character of the show?
I think it's a great thing for the world of the industry. I think it's actually a great thing for, again, coming from the American perspective of American network. There's always been this sense of Americans don't like seeing things that are outside of America. I don't think that's true at all, and I think that all that stuff's training them to see different worlds. So, again, biased as a Canadian, I would love to see a specific show set in Canada, in a specific city, and enjoy that world and get into it in the way that I get immersed into any other world like Fortitude.
Yeah, sure. We have, we just premiered season 2 of Broadchurch last night, and season 1 of Broadchurch, talk about a location being part of the character. First of all, I was like, wow, it's sunny in the UK. There's, it's this beautiful golden hour.
Are you sure it was from the UK?
Yeah, maybe it was Spain. All right, it was the coast of Spain, but it became, it added, instead of dark and gloomy, this beautiful place where something terrible had happened. So there was that contrast of this beautiful kind of ever-present golden hour or location that was just so stunning and made everyone feel so small in it, even though something so massive had just happened. So I think it's case by case, but when you've got a location like that and it's woven into the narrative somehow, it's really impactful. Versus characters front and center all the time.
Broadchurch and other great shows from the UK we've seen, and obviously we have Canadian content requirements, very specific ones when we get into creating some of the benefits that we talked about earlier financially for the budgets and the model, the financing plans, if you will. But in your network, which obviously BBC America has some very specific requirements there, how do you dovetail the sort of needs of say, the Britishness?
Well, yeah, I think Britishness has to remain, and there's no doubt, because then what are we? In a lot of ways, we become then just another entertainment channel in a landscape that's becoming less and less defined. We want something distinctive, something that differentiates us. So that's the heritage of the channel, and I think British content more and more ubiquitous now because of the platforms that we all use. But we balance it because we're in America. We're in 80 million homes in America. We're now partnered with AMC networks. So that was something I meant to mention before, Worldwide and AMC networks, this kind of fantastic meeting of editorial sense. You've got Walking Dead and Doctor Who and Orphan Black will be premiering across all 5 channels on the 18th. So that's just something that is just a phenomenal opportunity. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But the Britishness has to remain, and it can be a sensibility. And we don't have to be so on the nose with Britishness, but it can be a sensibility. It can be an amalgamation of storytelling as well. You know, Brits in America or vice versa. That's what Copper was. You know, our first commission shot here. You know, in Canada, in Toronto, was a very British story in America and a very American story in New York that hadn't been told on television. So, you know, just think of the name of the channel, British. You know, BBC America. It's the BBC in America, but not so specifically that it runs everything the BBC runs. It's content that's appropriate and relatable in the States.
And one of the issues on these partnerships, I'm sure, Corrie, is just finding the balance between where the story was originally put to you, the creative, and then perhaps having to torque it a little bit to meet some of the needs and the financing. It's, again, a necessary evil. We've got great writers in this country who can come up with anything at the end of the day that works, but it's a bit of a challenge.
Well, yeah, and I actually am delighted to hear, Liz, your perspective on that. You think American audiences are getting more open to seeing stories that are specific to a place, because for a long time it was a very weary refrain that nobody could ever really shoot anything in Canada for Canada, because particularly the American market would find it alienating or objectionable. And I think it's wonderful. I love seeing things that are set all over the place. That's part of the whole storytelling, is to try and imagine yourself in this world and find what's relatable about that world and that character and that story to your own life. So it's really refreshing. I think that's been, to be honest, that's been a real impediment for a lot of years in trying to find a common ground for some of our projects with U.S. broadcasters. I do think, yeah, I mean, it's a little, it's the same as actually partnering with any broadcaster. I mean, if I'm going to be more specific about your question, you have to match 2 different brands and sometimes 2 different audiences to the same project, and that sometimes can be just a little more finicky. Like if it's profoundly different, you're not going to get together in the first place. So it's more about, you know, for instance, some of our, well, Killjoys with space and sci-fi is trying to see where on the sort of fan of broadcast strategy we have on space for our audience and they have for theirs, where does Killjoys kind of fit into there, and how do we keep it in that kind of sweet spot so it'll work for both of us, enhance both of our channel brands, and really reach as big an audience as possible and be as kick-ass a show as the producers and the showrunner want to make it. So it can be a little tricky.
Indeed.
When I was thinking about Broadchurch and the remake, you know, there are a lot of shows get remade. Would you ever remake a show and set it in Canada? You know, an English-speaking show, would you localize it? Do you think you need to, or are audiences open to subtitles and accents?
Well, I would, me personally, I would not want to do a remake of an English language show, because unless I could somehow make it way better, because why would I? Broadchurch, to me, is a perfect example. It was an amazing show. No offense to the US version, not as good. And why bother? And weirdly, why bother doing it with David Tennant when it's like, that was kind of weird to me. Anyhow, that's just me. That's just me. No offense to anybody who participated in that. But what I was really excited that we did do was there's a show called 19-2 in Quebec, which was a massive hit there. Sphere Media, the producers, pitched the idea of doing a English version. And Tom Hastings, who I hope is in the room, was really instrumental in working on that and developing it and doing a pilot. We got involved, and I couldn't be prouder of the show, which is an English adaptation of that. It's still set in Montreal, still hear all the accents. It still feels really, really rich and true to the essence of that, but they are quite different now as you've gone through season 2, and are just gonna, if there's a season 3, which fingers crossed there would be, will just keep going. And they take on their own life, but they still have echoes of one another in it, but they are deeply satisfying standalone. So that I would totally do.
Interesting. So they're not
Totally do.
translations. It's literally
No.
2 different shows.
No, and in season 1, they started out much more aligned and then
Right.
started to slide. It was really cool. It was like tectonic plates. It was neat.
And just we are on Orphan Black. You talked about it earlier, and we're looking at a Japanese format of that show right now, and potentially a Latin American format of
Yeah.
that show, which could be neat,
Really
but
fun.
challenging as well. Okay, well we're kind of getting to that time where I'd like to open up a little bit, and we've got 3 amazing broadcasters here for some questions. Right away, go for it.
Great. Vicki Lane from Modicity. So I have a question about CRTC and co-ventures. I know that Rain and Beauty and the Beast are probably one of the few publicly known shows using that model right now. So my question is, do you see that model being used more in the future? What are some of the challenges and opportunities with that model compared to going more the pre-sale route with broadcaster like with Orphan Black and Flashpoint?
Well, the only thing I can say about Rain and Beauty and the Beast is that was a studio decision. The network, we really didn't. It totally came from the studio. So I would imagine if it worked for them, they would probably continue doing it.
You got views now? So more of them, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
and there will be there, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's going to tie. As I said, CBS is one of our main partners, so it really is going to. Again, I can't speak to that or the decisions why that was made. That was entirely up to them.
Any thoughts on why, it's not a very common model to approach? Are there challenges with sort of the regulatory side of getting that approved, or, what's the real incentive?
Well, I'll hazard a guess, because I don't know. Obviously, I don't work for CBS Productions or anything, but my sense is because, certainly right now, especially with our dollars so low, and the foreign services credit being pretty robust, there isn't really that same need. I mean, there's no need to do all the legal and business arrangements involved in setting up co-venture, because you can get a financial incentive to shoot here already. The co-venture model probably makes sense if you were trying to secure a more significant license fee from a Canadian broadcaster who needed it for its content requirements. I don't know how many Canadian broadcasters feel that that they have a growing need for co-venture shows, because we've got so many really great homegrown ones already. We have more than we can do. So I don't know that we'd actually, I kind of agree with Liz on this. I'm not sure it's going to really become this growing model. I just don't think so, but I could be totally wrong.
One question?
Yeah, I know we're talking about a lot of scripted drama. I deal in the world of feature film. So we do a lot of indigenous production, and I'm trying to look at more. We've sold it to create our own marketing or our budgets, but we want to try to find access into more worldwide markets. Is there still a demand in your channels for feature films, or
Like acquisition, you mean like pure acquisition or pre-sale?
acquisitions, or no, typically acquisitions?
We look for, we buy a significant amount of films, but specifically they are pre-marketed library titles that really kind of support, kind of hold up the schedule in a lot of ways and act as promotional platforms for our originals. So we're not in the first run business. Generally, it's everything from, Bond to, just big Hollywood pre-marketed titles that we don't necessarily, not to get too specific, we don't necessarily use any promotional time. They are basically kind of EPG friendly. And, on basic cable, people watch, you get a lot of reach, but it's very rare to have someone watch an entire film on basic. So it's basically they are reach platforms for the channel, and they are British and American kind of feature studio films for the most part.
It's pretty rare.
Yeah.
I know, I was going to say it's very
It's
limited.
a really boring answer from me,
Yeah.
but it's just a
I'm
very
sorry, I fell
practical
asleep
one.
there for a second,
Thank you
so-
very much. Good. I need to go back to the CRTC question. Get my head around.
That's way more
Get my head around
exciting.
that one. But I don't know. On CW,
No,
there's
I
a
was
lot
going
of
to say,
films.
because I spent a lot of time at Lifetime TV movies, and I love these
Right.
movies.
Sure.
And so when I came to the CW, I was like, let's do CW branded movies. Why not? I mean, House on the Hill or something,
Sure.
or Blair Witch can be a movie. Why can't we do like movies with our But it's really just,
It's
in
tough.
terms of just the financial parameters and the priorities of what the network has to accomplish, there's just no real room for original stuff like that. Every once in a while we'll acquire something, but it's not, again, we have different needs on air. So.
You had a question?
Yeah.
Question? Oh, I'm sorry. Go
Oh, sorry.
ahead.
What are you looking for as far as episode orders? Like, are you looking for ongoing limited series or?
We look for returning, and anywhere between 6 and 10 generally. Hours, broadcast hours. We will, on occasion, a couple times a year, we've got 2 different slots for scripted. One is a very high-profile scripted, and they could be minis or returning, things like Luther or the Hour or Broadchurch, that do quite a, there are high-profile minis from the UK that we're substantial co-producers. And then the Saturday night slot for now is the originals slot, and that's how we started to talk to Temple Street in early 2010 because we were looking for companion shows to Torchwood and Being Human and Doctor Who, these kind of great series out of the UK that crossed boundaries. There was no barrier to entry because they weren't real worlds. Orphan Black came up. We don't consider Orphan Black a sci-fi show. We consider it a
Depends who's
thriller.
asking.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a drama about a family and a group of people. So
like
it
The Odd
happened to
Family.
be launched out of Doctor Who because that was our night for genre programming. So those are the 2 kind of opportunities. A long answer to say 6 to 10, but I'm just trying to kind of paint the picture as clear as we can.
Right.
Hi, I'm Brian Hamilton from Omni Film Entertainment.
Hey, Brian.
Question for Richard. Your partnership with AMC, very exciting to see how Orphan Black is being rolled out. How is it affecting your development process? You spoke about how you love to be in the room with the creators, you like to meet with the writers, yet you're in New York and many of those people are in LA.
Right.
Does the AMC partnership, how does it plug into your development process?
Early days to really, it's about 2 months in. We have an LA, AMC and BBC America have LA offices. We do, quite honestly, a lot of video conference, a lot of Skype. We're in LA often. People come through New York quite often. There's nothing like being in the room for a pitch. I think it's just going to open up more opportunity for scripted. That's the mandate, I think, across the networks is probably a bit more scripted development. We have a number of shows in development with UK producers and with the BBC, with American studios right now, with independents as well. I think it's just will amp it up. But I'm sorry to not be able to be specific, Brian, but it's early days, but that's the direction of travel, for sure.
Generally good news from the
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Go for it.
Hi, Eric Brunberg behind the scenes. Corrie, this is maybe a question for you, and maybe you, John.
I don't answer questions. I'm moderating this thing.
Your answer comes.
Nice try. So my question is as follows. So given the topic, U.S. broadcasters, would you say, Corrie, in your experience in terms of the partnerships you've had with U.S. broadcasters, that BBC America and the CW are typical of the relationships that, given the clients they've had, do they stand for most U.S. broadcasters?
We're the best.
like
We're the
you?
2 best. We're
No.
definitely the 2 best.
Kinder and gentler broadcasters. And I'm particularly interested in the major, the other networks.
Well,
Come
yeah,
on,
they
come
are the
on,
best,
come
for
on.
sure.
Goes without
I
saying.
think it, and I think I know what you're talking about in terms of we have had shows that had pre-sales to CBS and to NBC and to ABC, and in each of those instances, my creative counterparts, they've been fantastic and really, really wonderful to work with, very collaborative. It's been very positive. The business teams are, thankfully, the producers have to deal with those a little more than we ever do, and we all know they have a reputation for being terrifically accomplished negotiators, and there's a reason for that, and then God bless. But I think our biggest challenge with the networks is they has been around the scheduling of trying to find accommodation for when we wanted to air the show, which is generally not in the summer, and when they did. So we've had issues around that had to be sorted out, sometimes sorted more satisfactorily than others. And I also found that the double-edged sword is they, because they aren't generally involved to the same degree in development that we may have had with LA Complex or with Orphan Black or with Killjoys with Sci-Fi or something, they're much quicker to cancel it if they don't like it. And then that puts a massive dent in a show that otherwise is really successful. And it makes distribution outside of Canada incredibly difficult for the producer and the distributor involved. And it can bring down a show, as we all know. I mean, Combat Hospital, as I understand it, is one of those casualties. It can be very tough. So it is a little bit of a knife edge where you're very pleased to have that relationship and that, you know, the resources that they bring to it are tremendous. But it's a little hair-raising, to say the least, because you just never know when you're just going to get kind of guillotined, and that could be horrible. So.
Yeah, it's true. The needs frankly, the needs are very different. I mean, LA Complex is the inverse, which is, if we can talk about that a little bit. First off, you know, LA Complex came to us as an acquisition, really, right? Because the first 6 episodes had been produced. It was something that was good, like young, good-looking people, and as you know, just trying to aspire to greatness in Los Angeles. So it seems like it was good summer programming for us. We love Martin Garrow. I think he's incredibly talented, so he's a piece of talent that we really wanted to be in business with. So that was an interesting way where we came in as an acquisition. And then when there was an opportunity to create more, we were on board with that. And frankly, we would have continued, but then the needs of the Canadian broadcaster changed.
Yeah.
Or the eyeballs of the Canadian audience changed.
Yeah, but it is one of the few times we've done it the inverse way. But it's tricky. It is tricky.
I think if I may, that from a producer's perspective, I think it's all about that. And Corrie was touching on it: the skin in the game and the symbiotic nature of the relationship between all the parties. The closer that the alignment is there for everyone on creative, on finance, on pulling the thing together, I think only then does it have a better chance at a longer life and a more a better product that ultimately gets put together. I think when the alignment isn't there, if someone's putting in a very small license fee in order to make something work financially, then I think you'll have potentially more problems. But when all the parties are coming together and there's far greater alignment on where they want the show to go and what it will achieve for them ultimately, and whether that's eyeballs or whether that's return on investment, et cetera, it's just the more that comes together, I think the better it will be. We can do deals with the devil to get something done quickly and get it on air and produce something, but it might not always be the best in the long run. Any other questions? Guys, I have a few here that I can ask from the audience if there's no more, but I'm happy to take any questions. Okay, so one other one that comes up, and it comes up a lot, we touched on it a little bit at the start, guys, is when it comes to primetime dramas and those big budget dramas, and Corrie, this is maybe again coming to you, how important is that US deal or that US green light or partner, having them on board, and do we have to lock that US deal down before we come to see you? And how important is it when that has happened? Or in fact, is it problematic if that's happened?
I think it really varies. I know this sounds really wishy-washy, but it's true. It varies by project and it varies by broadcaster. And it varies between Canadian broadcasters. Some Canadian broadcasters are more, see more advantages in having that US, ideally network, pre-sale already locked down in there, and that gives them what they need to provide that green light. At Bell Media, we're a bit different. We're a bit more what's the word, hesitant about it. We appreciate the advantages in that, but we also see that there may be some business interests that aren't aligned, so we want to talk about it before it gets locked down. I think basically if someone could walk into me and say, I have this fully financed show and here's what we need from you and we're done, that's fantastic. If it's a show that we are excited about and really want to do, I don't think, like, it's helpful having that U.S. broadcaster because they're bringing much needed financing to the table. But if it were France that was bringing it, that's okay too. Like, we're country agnostic. We're just driven by the needs to have the biggest possible chance of success, and a lot of that is driven by having great production values and a budget that can support the already fantastic creative that you've worked on. Because it's so hard to get a real hit anyhow, but if you don't even have those pieces together, you'll never do it.
Well, I think we're just about getting to the end of the session. Guys, thank you very much. Indeed, thanks to Liz, to Richard and Corrie for the time this morning. It was extraordinarily helpful and hopefully insightful for everyone here as well. I can't believe we got through a whole hour without even mentioning Netflix. It was awesome. But, thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
If everyone could just move to the ballroom, lunch is being served. Thank you.